Ted, what are you doing with all your adventures here? You trying to figure out what you want to run next?
No, I don't. I don't run pre-written adventures.
Then why do you own every single 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons Wizards of the Coast has put out?
Oh, you just got to get them all.
All right, man. Well, let's just talk about why we don't run official D&D adventures. Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdarchist Dave, and as always, I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted.
Hey, maybe it's your first time visiting Ted's Basement. It's a place where we like to discuss news, views, and homebrews for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And sometimes we even talk about other role-playing games.
So if you don't want to miss a single video, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button and attune to that notification bell.
Alright, so here's why we're doing this video. Why we, Nerdarchy, does not use official Dungeons & Dragons adventures. We always get asked about what's our favorite official adventure, which one are we running, how do we feel about running that, and to that, oftentimes we have to ask, do you even watch the channel? And maybe this is your first video with us. But over and over again, we pretty much talk about how we don't run pre-written adventures. I won't say never, but it is super rare, and only more recently that we've done anything with pre-written adventures. I know, like, you're doing a series currently that actually isn't even official Wizards of the Coast material.
Correct, and I've been running that with RPG Crate for quite a while. I run here on the channel a once-a-month game, with his material. And, with that, I do splice in some things of my own. I do, kind of tweak down to get a more refined version to get in 3 hours. The material that's there, it's great. The material in these books are great if you're particularly interested in running those kinds of games. I'm a player over on Mini Terrain Domain, and we're going through Tales of the Yawning Portal, and we're just about to finish up Forge of Fury. So I have played in official games, but when it comes time to sitting behind the GM screen, it's really just not what we're into.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about why we don't run adventures that are written and published by companies like Wizards of the Coast, Kobold Press, Braga Games, Nord Games. And we're going to also then discuss, ways we do actually use these books and some other things as well. So let's kind of jump into it.
So for us, we've been dungeon masters for a long time, you more so than myself, but as, dare I say, to use the term veteran game masters, there comes to be a familiarity with planning an adventure that for us, we do a lot of on-the-fly, gaming. It's more reactive than it is, let me just plan this in advance and I'm going to run. Now, mind you, I do have a game session coming up in a couple of days from when I'm recording this, and I've probably done more prep for that game than anything that I've done in 5th edition to date. But most of the time, we are more on the fly. Let's just see what happens and, let it roll from there.
All right, so you brought up a really important thing, and that is prep time, right? When you're Dungeon Master, and whether you're using homebrew material or using pre-written adventures, the expectation is that you will do a bunch of prep time. Many Dungeon Masters do, some do not. Some are more improv GMs like myself and Ted here, and I've played with many others there as well. They come up with a basic premise, put stuff out, the players do stuff, and then they just kind of react to it, like you said. Now, if you're not an improv DM, then that means you're going to be doing prep time. Well, the prep time you do is going to be different based on whether or not you're running a pre-written adventure or you're running homebrew. And then even further, you can kind of segment that out, especially on the homebrew side of things, of whether you're running more linear adventures or you're running more sandbox style adventures.
And part of that prep time is going to come into, are you reading the material or are you writing the material? Looking at the game that I run, with RPG Crate, they have, here's the material. It takes me about a half hour to read through, and I really try to go 2 or 3 times through, so I feel like I know the material. When I'm running my own game, live at the table, I am more familiar with the material without having read anything, because I've prepared it mentally and I've written it down, and I might write far less. In many sessions that I've run since I've done 5th edition, where I've run off of 1 to 3 sentences, and the players love what's there. And, that is great for my table. It might not be set for you.
Let's talk about prep time for a pre-written adventure. But speaking of pre-written adventures, like I said, we do run some sometimes. And more recently, over the last Christmas holiday, I had run a pre-written adventure from our sponsor, Frog God Games. Orcus Claws was the adventure that I had run. And, it was fun. It's the you're riffing on Orcus and Santa Claus, and it's a holiday adventure. It was really well written, and there was a lot of fun tropey things in it. Now, I had kind of tweaked it and changed it and made it my own. But over on the Frog God Games website, you can find tons of adventures. They're really known for making really big, mega adventures. Like, these books are huge. At this time of filming this particular video, they even have a Kickstarter going on. I think it's going to be done by the time this video goes up. The Sea King's Malice. So they write a ton of great material over there, and that I've enjoyed using in my own games.
As I said, I collect all kinds of stuff. So I have a lot of adventures. There's some stuff hidden behind me here and behind us over here from Frog God. One of the great monster manuals that they've put out, Tome of Horrors, is actually over there on the table, ready for my upcoming session this weekend, because I know I'm using something from it. So it is definitely something that I recommend. You should check out Frog God Games. There'll be a link down in the description. Help out the channel by helping out our sponsors.
All right, so the prep time for doing and running pre-written adventures, like we said, is different. You have to read the adventure, or you have to read at least enough to be like, okay, this is the part my players are going to get through, so I need to know up to that. Now, the other part of that, in my opinion, is I feel like you should be tweaking and highlighting and making changes to that adventure as you go along. Like I said, I ran a Christmas-themed adventure for my players around the holidays. That adventure was actually for like 3rd level characters. My players were like 17th level. And because I'm more of an improv GM, now I did read through the whole adventure, but on the fly, I had adjusted all my monsters to make them more challenging and make the adventure more challenging for my players. Now, they did skip a bunch of encounters because one of the characters just cast Wish and, went by it, which was fine. There was still plenty of material for a full evening session, and I think everyone had fun. But again, the prep time becomes different. You have to read the material. You have to know where your players are going to get to. You have to look and see, are there instances in this pre-written adventure that I can pull out and customize just a little bit to my individual players that are going to be at the table and make it feel like they belong in this adventure, and this adventure was kind of made for them.
And I do the same thing. In the game that I'm running, there was a time where, there's an encounter here. And there was no instance of role-playing with these monsters. They were supposed to just come out and attack and either, flee or die, what have you. And the crew that I have running, the players, they're far more into role-playing than they are combat. So there are times that I have to tweak and add more role-playing into what's there to fit my style of running and their style of playing. And I honestly feel that that's something that, as Dave says, if you're running pre-written stuff, you really do need to make it your own. You need to tweak it to the level, or the style, I should say, of what your players are going to be into. If they don't want to role play, you can skip those role playing encounters and just get to the combat. If they want more exploration, then get into the descriptions far more. Describe what's going on and allow them to really feel like they're in the dungeon or in the the mountain or wherever it is that your adventure is taking them. And it's super important to get into that so that you and the players are having the most amount of fun with it.
Now, you don't absolutely have to do that. That is just a strong recommendation from us. That's also one of the reasons why we don't run published adventures, because we actually feel like it's easier for us to just do our own thing. Like Ted said, sometimes I only write 1 to 3 sentences. I've been there as well. And I don't know if you've seen the meme where like the players are like, oh, you've invested so much in this world. You've done all this world building. DM looks at notes. Sexy goblin looks at players. Yes, I did. like we're kind of that meme. And for us, doing all this stuff is a lot more work than it is just improv. It doesn't mean we don't think about our games and put more mental effort into them. It's just that we do it in a different way. Like I might be thinking about my game while I'm showering or while I'm driving and running errands, as opposed to writing things down. And from that, I kind of formulate stuff. And also, depending on what kind of players you have in your group, if they are very active players, a lot of times prepped material doesn't get used because they're going to do things that are different.
And speaking of different, that is something that wound up coming up in, one of the recent games that I had where I was a player. We're running through Forge of Fury. We were doing for a long time 1 to 2 rooms per session, because we play basically a 3-hour game, and it is very RP heavy. And we went through so much that the DM really didn't have a clue what's going on. And, and the fact that it was streamed, like, it was a struggle for him to be like, all right, how do I keep this game going? Because we just floored through so much. And it was a challenge. It was a struggle. Jake is a great DM. He was up to the challenge, but when you're preparing stuff for a pre-written game, you might not have a clue how far they're able to get over the course of a given session. Now, if you're playing at your home table, versus streaming, it's not so bad to be like, all right, we're going to pick up the book and I'm just going to quick double check, what the next area is and go from there, versus, Jake doesn't really touch the books while we're gaming. He's always, right there, staring at the camera. So, it's a lot easier when you're at the table. But, if you're not prepared for where they're going to get to, it will slow down the game a little bit if you're just not ready for what the players do.
So, I mean, Ted kind of touched on a little bit about how, an adventure that is put out by a publisher has planned encounters in it, right? And it has kind of a set idea of how those encounters are supposed to go, and they're usually combat. But as you pointed out, you guys were probably able to breeze through a lot of encounters because you didn't have combat, right? You found other ways of working through them, or you were able to role play your way through them. So everything just happens so much faster. And so those planned encounters don't operate the way they were. Like you said, you got ahead of it. Now, the difference between you're running an adventure written and running your own adventures is when you write your own encounters, you might have that already baked in because you know your players. You've been playing with this group. Maybe these are your friends. Maybe you've played several campaigns with them, and you already have an idea what to expect. You know that they are going to want to talk to the goblin instead of kill the goblin, especially if you gave him a funny hat.
The planned encounters versus the created encounters. The planned says, well, this is for, a party of 4 to 5 4th level adventurers, and this is how much XP it's worth. When you create the encounter, you specifically know, all right, well, I've got a fighter, a barbarian, a rogue, and a paladin. I have very little healing. I have no control, casters in the group. Well, that's a very different encounter than, what would be written in the book. Oh, I've got all charisma people in the group. I've got a bard. I've got a sorcerer. I've got a paladin. Oh my God, these guys are going to socialize their way through intimidation and persuasion through half the encounters in my dungeon. Well, all right, they're a roleplay heavy party. Let's plan that. All right, let's throw in something that you just can't talk to so that they will get some combat. Great. Here's a golem. Here's an adiug. Great. We got a nice adventure planned for that particular party. And I think, that comes from knowing the game, knowing the players. And while, again, the books are great, they're a great resource for a lot of different reasons, but they're not able to be written to take your party's characters in mind.
And that is the difference between a generic encounter from pre-written adventures and the tailored encounter that you, the GM, has created specifically for your adventuring party.
And speaking of, that adventuring party, the campaign that's here, it's not taking those parties' goals into mind. Oh, you've got an awesome character backstory where, like so many others, my brother or parents were murdered and I must, seek out, the murderer and avenge them. Well, unless you're going to just, take control of that module and be like, here's that guy, and you just insert it, it can't take those character goals, whether it be specific magic items, specific, quests that they want to do into an account unless you're just going to add it. And in that point in time, you're then homebrewing a pre-written adventure and you're halfway there anyway.
Yeah, so essentially you have two options with the pre-written adventure and your characters' backstories, and that is essentially tailoring your adventure to those characters and inserting things from their backstory into the adventure that wasn't there before, or you're going to just completely ignore their backstories and it has no bearing on the game. So you're going to have to make a decision as a GM how you want to handle that. And, some players aren't going to care. Other players might be dissatisfied.
So, it really comes down to, one final question. We've got all of these books here. Why on earth do we have them? What is the reason for having this stuff?
I think pretty much you crave stuff.
No, the reason is, as I've said several times throughout the video...
Wait. It's got the electrolytes you need?
No, it's not Brondo.
Oh.
There is a lot of great resource and material in here that you can use. These come with maps. They come with monsters. They come with magic items. They come with NPCs that you have the ability to, I'm going to go in and I'm going to use this. So suppose, all right, Tales from the Yawning Portal is a really good one to look at. Suppose somebody doesn't show up for the session tonight and you ended last session in town. Well, you know what? There's a dungeon in here that you can go use and you're going to go explore for a session or 3 while that player's out of town on vacation or what have you. Now you've got something that you can use as a resource for a mini encounter. But, the rest of them that are full campaign arcs, as I said, maps, magic items, monsters that you can, steal and plunder and use portions of. And who better to steal from than the official publishers of the game or other great third-party publishers like our sponsor, Frog God Games, that produce really awesome content that you're going to then be able to use and use as guidelines for how you plan your next dungeon.
Yeah. I would like to say one thing for sure is I feel like Wizards of the Coast have done a really good job of having a variety of different adventures that they've published. You have Tales from the Yawning Portal is an anthology. Storm King's Thunder is an epic story. Waterdeep Dragon Heist is an urban adventure.
You got Hoard of the Dragon Queen, Rise of Tiamat that are kind of, somewhat linked together. You've got Princes of the Apocalypse and Curse of Strahd.
So you've got Horror, Tomb of the Annihilation is somewhere around here as well.
It's behind me. I didn't want to just cover everybody.
Which is a hex crawl. And the point that I was trying to make is that they're all very different kinds of adventures. And even if maybe you don't want to run pre-written adventures, these can teach you how to run different styles of adventure. And that is the really cool thing that Wizards of the Coast has been doing. The next one coming up, Baldur's Gate Descent, is an awesome into hell style game, into the underworld. So they've been doing a really good job of mixing it up. And this can spark your imagination, give you ideas, teach you different ways to run the game. Also add different rules. Out of the Abyss isn't in this stack either. But when I was running an Underdark game, I used that as a resource because there was a ton of information in there about the Underdark. So there's a lot of reasons why you might want to pick up pre-written adventures and pull them apart and use different elements from them, even if you don't plan on running them themselves, or you just might even just be a collector and you just like having them.
So there's some helpful tips for, why we don't and what you can do with these awesome pre-written adventures.
Before we head on out, I just want to take a moment to invite you to join Nerdarchy, the adventuring party, over on Patreon. Tell them what they can find over there.
We're creating products for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons that players and DMs alike can drop right into their game.
But that's not all. Every month we do a giveaway, and our patrons automatically get entered into that giveaway.
We also have weekly hangouts with our patrons and more.
Quest on down to the description where you can join the Nerdarchy adventuring party over on Patreon. And until next time, stay nerdy.